Hello, this is Tony Heller from RealClimateScience.com. George Orwell said, "So much of left-wing thought is a kind of playing with fire by people who don't even know that fire is hot." A good example of this was during the 2020 campaign when Joe Biden promised to shut down fossil fuels.
But kiddo, I want you to just take a look, okay? You don't have to agree, but I want you to look in my eyes. I guarantee you, we're going to end fossil fuel, and I am not going to cooperate. Okay?
Investors believed what Joe Biden was saying, and as a result, energy prices have skyrocketed since that time. Oil companies aren't going to invest in new wells if it's likely the wells will never be allowed to be completed. Joe Biden delivered on his promises, and as a result, on his first day in office, he shut down the Keystone XL pipeline. And it wasn't the first time Biden did that. He's been stalling the pipeline since it was proposed in 2008. The pipeline would have been operational many years ago if it weren't for Joe Biden's interference. The reason they shut down the pipeline was because they wanted to reduce the supply of fossil fuels. The belief was that if fossil fuels weren't available, it would force the public into using wind and solar power. Another thing Biden did during his first weeks in office was shut down new oil and gas leases on federal land. And he shut down an Israeli gas pipeline to Europe in favor of a Russian pipeline through the Ukraine. As a direct result of Biden's actions, the world no longer has enough energy. So today, Biden declared an energy emergency. He said the emergency was caused by Russia and climate change, and he was going to solve the problem with solar panels. Today's executive order is essentially a repeat of Biden's green energy scam from 13 years ago. He poured billions of dollars into scam green energy companies, almost all of which failed. Biden's policies are not only making energy unavailable for poor people, but he's also making food unavailable as well. Meat is becoming too expensive, and bread may become unavailable in many parts of the world. Similarly, in the UK, 500,000 businesses are at risk of going bankrupt. But according to Joe Biden, this is all good. Last week he said, "When it comes to the gas prices, we're going through an incredible transition that's taking place. That, God willing, when it's over, we'll be stronger and the world will be stronger and less reliant on fossil fuels." So Biden believes that by making energy too expensive, the world will magically transition to wind and solar power. And the New York Times agrees with him. They believe that making prices too expensive for the poor and middle class will be good for the planet. But the reality is that the world is not transitioning to wind and solar. Only about 3% of the world's population's energy usage is supplied by wind and solar. The vast majority is supplied by coal, oil, and natural gas. There's a very good reason why wind and solar aren't making much progress, and that's because they're inherently unreliable. Civilization can't simply shut down when the wind isn't blowing or the sun isn't shining. But for some reason our Western leaders like Joe Biden and Boris Johnson can't grasp this very simple concept. One of my favorite Hollywood movies was from 2003. Cinderella Man was the story of future heavyweight champion James Braddock during the 1930s. They didn't have enough money to pay their natural gas bill, and the gas man came and shut it off. Their children would have frozen to death, so they went out and got whatever wood they could to burn in their stove. In this scene, they were cutting down the Esso gasoline sign in order to obtain fuel to keep their house warm. Biden's energy policies are bringing on a similar disaster to the Great Depression from the 1930s. And yet he imagines that his nonsensical belief system is saving the planet. Poland is already telling their citizens that they're not going to have enough fossil fuels and that people are going to need to keep themselves warm by burning wood. The world has plenty of fossil fuels to supply everybody for a long time, but irrational left-wing thinking is driving policy in the West and leading it towards disaster. Toto has been pulling back the curtain on this insanity for the past 14 years. You can visit him, Kyrie, Caesar, Upala, and Toki on the web at RealClimateScience.com.